This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Ayin Zayin. We're holding on Ayin Vav Amid Beis, approximately 8 lines from the bottom. The first word on line is Me Elu. Continues the Gemara. Nope, that wasn't right. There we go. Continues the Gemara quoting the Brisa. Tana Kamei Derav. They taught a bunch of Braisais. They taught in front of Rav. Noisin lenschara mishali. Again, going back in the case that we saw yesterday, that if a worker is hired, he shows up to do his work, and there's no work for him to do, the halacha is he has to pay him mishalim. He has to pay him incomplete. Omar lei, Rav responds, Chabibi Omar, Chabibi, my said, Ilu ana havai. If I was there, I would not have given them Ella Kipayal bottle. I would not have paid them in full. I would only have given them like a Payal bottle. V'ata Amrit, and you say, Nosab Schar Mishalim. Ask the Gemara, why not? V'alakatani, but we learned, Eino Deima Baton, Laba Rekon, Oisem Lachel Yeshe bottle. Says the Gemara, what about the fact that it says that it's not the same amount of work? Meaning, the Brisa itself taught us that if you didn't work and you didn't not work, but you didn't proactively work, you didn't exert yourself, you do not get paid in full. So says the Gemara, what's going on in the Brisa? Answers the Gemara, Loisai Mu'akamei. They didn't finish the rest of the Brisa in front of Rav. So Rav thought that this Brisa meant that you get Schar Mishalim, but he didn't hear the end of the Brisa, which clearly writes that if you didn't work, you're not going to get paid the same amount. There are those who learn now, indeed, they finished the Brisa in front of Rav. And this is what Rav said. Chabibi Amar, my uncle said, Chabibi Avi Ano, if I would have been there, I would not have given them at all. And you say you got like a pile bottle? Says the Gemara, 1 second. Why wouldn't you get paid at all? What about the end of the price that clearly says you get like a pile bottle? Answers the Gemara, 3 lines to the bottom, Loi Kasha. Ha desari la'ari midurta. When did Rav Chia say that Rav is quoting now that you don't get paid at all? Is where they went to the field the night prior, and on that night they should have realized that there was no work to have done. So therefore, when the next day the workers show up, they inspected it, and the night before they saw there was nothing to do. So why do the workers now claim they want to get paid? Whereas if they didn't inspect the land the night before, then of course the workers have to get compensated that they could have taken other work, and therefore they get kipayel bottle. Kihad Amarav, says the Gemara, this is similar to that which Rava said, Hayman Da'agir Agira on the last line of Ayin Vav Beis, Hayman Da'agir Agira L'Rivka. There were someone who hired workers to dig ditches. Vasa Mitro Mali Imaya. The rain came and filled up the field with water, and therefore the field was no longer able to be dug, those ditches in it. So if they inspected the land the night before, and we turn over to Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, then Pseida de Payalim, then the Payalim have to incur the loss. Whereas if they did not inspect the land the night prior, then Pseida de Balabais. And the top Rashi over here speaks out, V'yavli Kapayal Batal. Tab Rashi speaks out, Pseida de Payalim, Gisham Shiyarad Hefsid Payalimu. D'Yavlu Midi, D'Amrlo Maslech Lekaram. They inspected the night before. There was no problem. Then it pours. So what should the Baal Bais, who's nothing could have done differently? The mazel of the workers, they accepted upon themselves a job, and then it poured. They're the ones that incur that loss. V'amar Rava, continues the Gemara, 3 lines from the top. Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph. V'amar Rava teaches Rava, Haiman da'agir agiri lidavla. Someone who hired workers to water the field, vasa mitra, and then rain came and watered the field, so there was nothing for the workers to do. The workers incur such a loss. Asanara, but if a river comes, overflows, and therefore waters the fields, and of course, this has to do with the level of norm, and at what point we say it's the mazel of the worker that caused it. Says the Gemara, V'amar a similar and related case, 6 lines down, teaches Rava again. Hi man, to water the field, and half the day the river stopped flowing. The river was that which the workers were utilizing to gather the water to water the field. Now the river stopped flowing and the workers have no way to water the field. Says the Gemara, if this is not common, then say the Pailim must be Mazlacha Garam. A random thing occurred. That's your problem, workers. You got to figure it out. You now have no water, so you're gonna have to find something. Of the pasek, if this happens all the time, then the difference is ibnei masab say the Pailim. Again, so if the workers are from that town, then they should have known that, and they incur the loss. Lavnei masa, if the workers are not from that town, therefore there's no reason why they should have known that river is commonly stopped. Pseida, the Balabais is one that's going to have to incur that loss. V'amai Rava, 10 lines down, the first one line is Pseida. Teaches Rava one last day, someone hired workers to do something for him. Workers, either they worked fast, as we'll see, or whatever its reason, they finished the work halfway into the day. If there's other work which is not as difficult as the first work, then Yavlu, the Baal Bais is allowed to say, I hired you for the day. You finish halfway through here. Here's some more work to finish up. Inami dikvasa mavkilahu. Or if it's equal, he could also tell them to do it. The kasha mine, but if the only thing the Baal Bais has to be done for that day is work which is more difficult, he's not allowed to give it to them. And rather, you hire them, they did their job, they finished early, okay. So you have to pay them their regular wages. Asks the Gemara, why is this last thing true? You shouldn't have to pay him for the full wages of that day, asks the Gemara. It should be enough for the duration of the day to pay him like a pile batal, because that's what he's doing. Explains the Gemara in a Chanami. Ki kamar Rava. When did Rava say you pay him kipayel batal? Bachlushi de mechuza. This is by the people, the porters of mechuza. Dia avid chalshi. Why? Because if they don't work, they become weak. And therefore, there's no benefit for these workers to sit and do nothing. So those particular workers, you got to pay them in full because they're not gaining by not working. It would be better for them to work. And says, let's go back to a previous brisa. We evaluate, says the Gemara, that which they already did. Ketzad hayafa shisha dinarim naslasela kasavar rabbanan yad payel al yoina. Oy, the two dots over here are a little bit funny because we're in the middle of a brisa. But oy yigmu malachton v'elu shnei slaim. Says the Gemara Pshita, of course, why wouldn't they do that? The case we're discussing is the cost of labor went out, and therefore the workers stopped working because they wanted to get a higher job. The Balabais said, what are you doing? Finish up, please, for me the work. So I would have thought that the workers could tell the Balabais, we thought that you encouraged us to do the work, that you're going to give us the higher wages. Kamash Milan, and the Balabais could say, no, what I meant is, I'll make sure to give you food and drink. You'll have what to eat as you work, but not that I was going to plan on paying you the higher amount. Smack in the middle of the Amud at the two dots continues the Gemara. Sela, nice and nice sela. Says the Gemara Pshita. Of course, they work to sell, they get paid to sell. What's the chiddush over here? Lo Yitzricha explains the Gemara, the Zala Vinity, the exact opposite. The cost of labor went down. Meikar, from the beginning, Vagrina Betvei Zuza. And therefore, he hired them for an extra zuz. But then, guess what? Lusov Yakar Vinita. So the workers thought they're getting higher than the going wage, than the rate. What happens over time? The rate goes up. And now the average worker gets even more. So maybe the workers could say, we wanted one up for whenever the current was. So if the current was 3 and you gave us 4, now the current's 4, we want 5. Kamash Blah and Amr the Balbais Cameron Lukut face you to Dlavi Kim Luchu Ashta Kim Luchu. Balbais can say no. The only reason why I did that is when you weren't sure. So I offered you a little bit extra to push you along. But now I wouldn't necessarily give you more than the current rate, which is what I originally agreed to give you. Continues the Gemara, the 2 dots. About 20 lines from the bottom. You go by what there still has to be done. Rav Dais holds because Yad Poil al Tachtain, the Poil gets the lower hand. Again, it's the exact flip of the previous Gemara. The previous Gemara is Yad Bal Bayis al Tachtaina. Here Yad Poil al Tachtaina. Says the Gemara, the Zelvitz went down. The Baal Bayis could say the reason why is I wanted to pay you less. The workers could say no. No, we thought we're getting more. And then the next case, it's the exact flip of the previous Gemara Pshita. Omer Vunabredi Rav Nasan Lo Tzricha to Oslo Inu Gabe Zuza. That he hired them for a cheap price. Everyone's work went down. I would have thought that the Balabayas could say, I agreed to give you less than the current rate. So I want to do the same thing now. But once we're hired, then we're not going to take less than at least what you agreed to give us. So says the Gemara, those are going to be all the different permutations between up and down. Rav Daisa and the Chachamim, Yapayel, Yad, Balabayis, Al Tachtaina, with the various rates. Continues the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom with a Psak Halacha. Amar Rav teaches Rav Halacha, Rav Daisa, that the Payel has the lower hand. Asks the Gemara, Omiva Rav Hachi, does Rav really say this? Seemingly the Poil has a good hand. He can even back out in the middle of the day. Maybe you're going to tell me the difference between Rav Daisa Beitzchiros, Likablanos, and Rav. Rav and Rav Daisa, the 2 cases, one was Chiros and one was Kablanis. Says the Gemara, be shiny late, but there's such a differentiation. Vatani went to the Bryce. In the middle of the day, the worker heard a relative died, or the worker got sick. So if he's a hired worker per day, you have to give him the normal rate for half a day's work. The fact that he can't complete is not his problem. Again, Ayin Zayin Amud Bey is the top line. But that's only if he's a schara. That's only if he's a schir. If he's a kabla and he gets paid per job, nicely kabla nusai, then you have to pay him the whole. Then you have to give him the prorated amount for whatever he did. Exactly, the whole cash for half the job. That was in English. But it's not that you're paying him for a half a day's work, you're paying for half the job. Says the Gemara, so we see there is a chaluk between schiros and kablanas. So money, who is this price? The Rabban and they hold that the worker always has the upper hand, so it wouldn't only be in these cases of oines. Says the Gemara, we see a rider of Daisa holds it's going to be the same thing. Yad Poel is always going to be al tachtoina, and therefore it's a kasha and Rav. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, B'davar ha'avod v'divrei hakol. Rav Daisa does indeed make a chaluk between schiras and kablanos when, says the Gemara, in a case in which when the workers stop in the middle of the day, there's going to be a loss. Both Tanakama and Rav Daisa will agree to such a case, and therefore we do not have a stira in Rav. Continues the Gemara Tinan. Let's understand at what point the worker is going to be canast for stopping in the middle of the work. Says the Gemara, quoting a Mishnah that we had in Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Mishnah said, this is the end of the Mishnah, whoever changed, whoever deviated, he has the lower hand. Whoever backed out, he has the lower hand. So says the Gemara, I understand what it means. Kol hamishane, whoever deviates has the lower hand. That's going according to Rav Yehuda. But when the Mishnah said, whoever reneged, whoever backed down in the middle of the day, he also has the lower hand. La suye mai. What is that coming to include? My lav, la suye poyel ucha Rav Daisa. Something to include a poyel according to Rav Daisa, that if he stops in the middle of the day, he has yadai ala tachtaina. He has the lower hand. If that would be true, then we see that Rav Daisa even says yadai shel hapoyel ala tachtaina, even in a case of a schir yoim, not only in the case of a kablon. Says the Gemara, El Rav Daisa tarti kamar. Must be Rav Daisa said both. Rav Sav like Chado, Polyglay Bachado, who ends up with a steer and Rav, and says the Gemara, no. Classically, Rav only held of one of the two dinim of Rav Daisa, but it's not a question in Rav Daisa. Iba Yisema, another way of learning. Call him Chayzer Bay Yadach Latana Lech the Tani. It's going in the Brisa that says. What's the case? You bought it for 1,000 and you gave him 200 zuz. And then one of the guys wanted to back out. The seller backs out, and the purchaser has the upper hand. Or to Amr like you tell him, so if the seller backs out, the buyer can say, either give me back my cash or give me a portion of land in ratio and proportion to that which I paid for. Says the Gemara. So where does he has to pay him? Minedius, the best land he has. If the buyer backs out, then the seller has the upper hand. How? He could either tell him, take back your cash, or he could tell him, here's a piece of land, connected the money that you gave so far. And where does, since it's Yad Moicher, the seller has the upper hand, so where does he pay the Loikeach? Menaziburi is from the lowest quality. Rashba Goimer continues the Brisa, Malamdin son Shaloi Yachzru. Says Shimon Gamliel, we teach them that they can't back out Ketzah. Cost of light, they write any Pliny ben Pliny. Macharti saw that Pliny is the Pliny. I sold this certain land to a certain person, Belev Zos. But nicely, Memasayim Zos, or any Noishabach has me Zos. So you write a star that this field is worth 1,000, he paid me 200. And one more time. And he plenty man plenty v'charti said the plenty belav zuz nasli me'asayim zuz. V'arini noisha b'chaz me'azuz. And there's 800 zuz that he still has to pay me. Kana. The halacha is the purchaser acquires. They do machzor zashar fila achar kama shanim. Meaning they write explicitly that you paid part and you have to owe us part. And therefore that will not change once it is documented on the sale. Continues the Gemara about 13 lines from the bottom, the two dots, Amar Mar. The previous brisa we said mechon magbihu. So we said that when the buyer has the upper hand, we said mina idias this in a chasav. Why? Says the Gemara, why would the seller have to pay this buyer from the best? It should be like a regular Baal Chayv, you have a debt, you owe it to him. Okay, Salachas, you get Beinanis. Furthermore, the Oid says Gemara, Ara Diyav Zuzi. Why can't he pay him with the land that he paid for? Who cares of the quality? He's buying this piece of land, so I can give him this piece of land. Why? Because the seller backed out, he has to go give her a higher quality. Says Rav Nachman Yitzchak, you're right. Whatever piece of land he wanted to buy, that land he gets. But again, only part of that land because you're backing out. Which part? Says Rav Nachman Yitzchak, the best of it if when the buyer has the upper hand, the worst of it when the seller has the upper hand. Rav Acha, Breder Avikam, Ravilu Temi is in a chasa, the best of his properties. Staman, the Yav Zuzi Arab, Alvi Zuzi Azuli Moizel Mezavin, Nechse Vavalekin Nizek, Utnan, and Izakin Shamlam Idias. Says the Gemara. No, says Rav Acha, Breder Avikam, you always have to pay the best stuff. What's the reason? The reason is because when someone buys something for 1,000 zuz, he must have sold his other properties to get the cash. So he took a loss to go into this deal. So by you backing out, it's not stam, oh, I'll give you half the piece of land. The guy took a loss to collect all the cash. So therefore you have to actually pay him from the best of your properties. Says the Gemara on the last narrow line, time of the cost of le'achi. It sounds like the only reason why this works is because they wrote this. There would not be a kinyan. But is that true? Asked the Gemara Vatani. We learned in a brayso. I know you say Rav Nachavev Ram Loimani Chayzer B. Erebuni Machal. If I back out the security is yours. V'Allah Meramani Chayzer B. Achbul Charvud. I'll pay you back twice. Sky Matan. I'm David Rav Yaisi. Rav Yaisi the Tamei. So it says the Gemara. Where did Rav Yaisi come from? Namar Asmach Kanya. Rav Yehuda says back into the price. According to Rav Yaisi, is a kinyan. It's not a full kinyan, only accordance to the amount of cash that was the loan. Amar Ashbag b'medvar mamur bizman she'ein lo yiravain yikoin. It's only when the buyer said a ravaini yikoin mai. A ravain should be a kinyan. Avol macher lo yisad the belav zazvin aslam bihem. Chav mishmei yozuz kano machzor lo yisashar. If you lacher kama shanim. But he can do that even after many years. What do we see? Says Rav Shimon Gamliel that even when you only pay in part, you have a kinyan on the whole thing, and the rest of it is considered a halva. But we said in our brayso that it's not true. Or, excuse me, we said in this brayso that's not true. It's only if you explicitly said that there's going to be a kinyan. Answers the Gemara Lokasha Tkail Benafik Azuzi Lokail Benafik Azuzi. The difference is, do we see him trying to go get the cash or not? The Amar Rava, as we've seen already, Ayman the Zavin Midi Lechavim Kavan Avik Azuzi Loi Kani Loi Kavan Avik Azuzi Kani. It depends. Does he show that he's trying to come up with the cash or not? We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from another din in Rava the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.